Hello, and welcome to a special episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger, and it is time for another Robert Mays Monday presented by Pagliacci Pizza. And pizza is an appropriate sponsor, not just in general for a Monday night football game. Obviously, you should be ordering some Pagliacci Pizza for tonight. But we're in Detroit, and Detroit's got its own pizza, Robert. I'd like to know your opinion of Detroit pizza as I welcome you into the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well, and I'm a huge fan of Detroit-style pizza. I'm a sucker for texture in all foods, and the fact that you get a little bit of crunch, big fan of it. There's a place in Chicago called Pagliacci's, which is actually a Brooklyn pizzeria, but the location near me, they do a Detroit pan-style pizza, and whenever I have the time to actually go grab it, I'm always happy that I do, because that little crisp on the edges, there's nothing better than that.
It's my first time in Detroit. I actually decided I was going to risk everything, Robert, by coming down here to the Detroit Riverwalk, rumored to have decent Wi-Fi, and so far, hopefully that's proving true. But, I wanted to get out in the city and see a little bit. I'm going to try to interview some people and talk to some folks, some Lions fans, stuff like that. But, you obviously live closer to here. It's a city that's gone through so much sports-wise, and you got the Tigers sneaking into the baseball playoffs. You've got the Lions, who have gone from irrelevance to, a Super Bowl contender and maybe a favorite in some people's minds. What's been your experience with Detroit as a sports city?
I think it's in a really good spot, and I love the fact that Detroit is having this moment right now. I was lucky enough to be at the Lions-Rams playoff game last year, just because when we saw that matchup was going to happen, I was like, it's 4.5 hours away. And for playoff games, I can go to playoff games. I can't go to regular season games because we have to cover the whole league. But when there's only one game going on at a time, I can swing it. And so I just had to be there for so many different reasons. And being in that stadium and feeling what it was like, and knowing that Lions fans are getting to enjoy this. One of my really good friends, her dad is a huge Lions fan, and it's kind of trickled down to her a little bit. And I'm really happy for those people, because I know what it's like to root for a semi-downtrodden franchise for decades at a time. And when you get those moments where everything feels like it's clicking, you're relevant, you've kind of fall in love with that team for one reason or another, that is the best possible experience as a sports fan. And I do feel like Lions fans specifically are getting that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I love sports hate. I'll be honest. I love, especially in football, a little sports hate. I got plenty of that for the 49ers, a few other franchises, but I don't have that for the Lions. I actually I really like this team. Not only do I like them because I like the Bills and the Lions and some of these underdog cities that have had a lot of rough goes of it on the sports side, but I also just love this team. I love Dan Campbell as a coach. I love the way they're built up front. I love the offensive line. I love the identity of this team, that they run the ball. I even kind of like Jared Goff, man. His journey and learning where the sun rises and sets, and also how to lead an NFL team. So, I mean, I don't have any animosity towards this team. And, it's kind of an odd experience to go into such a big game and not really have any sports hate for the team you're facing. But I think that's not totally true the other way. The Seahawks have dominated this matchup. They've won 9 of the last 10. 6 in a row. When I drive around listening to Detroit sports radio, they are not super thrilled with the Seahawks. This has been a game that they've circled. Do you have any reason that in your mind the Seahawks have done so well against the Lions of late?
I think the way the Seahawks have wanted to play offensively over the last couple of years, notably last season with that, really exciting, high-scoring game, the best thing you could do to the Lions over the last couple of seasons is get them in base personnel and try to throw the ball around the yard, especially when they were trying to find themselves a little bit on defense. And that's exactly how Seattle wanted to play under Shea Waldron. It didn't matter that they had 3 receivers on the roster. I mean, that team was living in 12 and 13 and 2 and 3 tight end sets for a huge chunk of last season. And so I think that the way Seattle wanted to construct its passing game specifically was a really bad matchup for that version of the Lions.
What do you think's changed? Because it sounds like that's a different version than what you see now.
I think up front, the Lions are just a better team than they've been in years past. The Marcus Davenport injury is a big one because he'd been playing really good ball for them. And I actually feel like beyond what he was giving them as a pass rusher on the other side of Aiden Hutchinson, I love the physicality he was bringing in the run game. And if you just look at the way the Lions defensive line has been constructed over the last couple of years, their body types, they like big dudes up there. And that makes sense. You think about where Aaron Glenn comes from and New Orleans for the last, God, I don't even know how many years. It seems like they have 270-pound edge rushers every single year. And that's how the Lions were playing. Marcus Davenport coming over is not an accident. John Kaminsky, who's also hurt for them right now, it's another like 280-pound tweener. They still have Josh Paschal up front. So there's just a lot of size and physicality among that group. I think as a lot of the league has gotten a little bit smaller, you think about teams like the Broncos, where all their edge guys weigh like 240 pounds. Those aren't the guys walking through the door for the Detroit Lions. And I think that's one of the reasons it's been a little bit harder to run on this team. And I also think that the linebackers have just improved. Derek Barnes was playing good ball, but then he gets hurt. So I think a lot of the reasons that the Lions defense in their front seven was looking like a little bit better and a little bit of a different unit, that may be taken away from injuries. And the timing on that may be pretty fortuitous for the Seahawks.
Yeah, well, let's talk about injuries. There's so many. We could take up the whole show just on that topic. But, on the Seahawks side, you're without really your four starting defensive linemen, Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams. All but Mafe were expected to be out for this game. The Mafe news came a little bit later in the week on Friday. On the Lions side, you've got Frank Ragnow, their all-pro center. You've got, obviously, you mentioned Davenport, Derek Barnes. And then as of yesterday, Brian Branch, their all-rookie, was slot corner, now safety, out potentially with illness, listed as doubtful. We'll find out soon if he's out for sure. Which of those injuries do you think are going to have the biggest impact on this game?
I just think about Seattle up front, especially against this Lions team, even without Frank Ragnow. And I do think that there are some Ragnow things that we can get into why this potentially matters specifically against Seattle and where the Lions have had some of their issues offensively. But I mean, this Lions running game has been one of the most reliable facets of any offense in the NFL over the first 4 games. When they've been struggling to throw the ball, when they've been trying to find themselves, they can always just say, you know what? We're just going to run the ball 8 times in a row. Think about the overtime possession that they had against the Rams. They did that a little bit at the beginning of the game against the Cardinals. So them being able to just do that and kind of settle themselves, I think has been a really important part of their formula on offense. So if the Seahawks are going to walk into this game without 3 or 4 of their most important pieces up front, I think that there's a very good chance that we see the impact that has.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. I mean, I want to talk about identity in a little bit, but as far as game planning and where you think these injuries are going to impact how they would like to approach this game on either side, talk a little bit more about that.
The problem for Seattle right now, I think, is that they've needed extra bodies to defend the run consistently. And you mentioned, I think it was last week or the week before, Mike Macdonald was at the podium and he mentioned if you can stop the run out of too high looks, like that's the secret sauce. That goes a long way. Problem is the Seahawks haven't been able to do that this year. If you look at the numbers, they have the 6th best rushing success rate on defense, according to Next Gen Stats, when they're in one high look. It's 32% for opposing offenses. When they bring that other safety back out of the box, it goes to the 6th worst rushing success rate on defense. It's at 45.8%. So that is a massive gap. And the Lions, it's been the exact same thing with them. When they're facing too high looks, they are crushing people. They have the best rushing success rate in the league. It's like 59%. When teams walk that second safety down to the box, it goes to 37%, which is the 23rd best in the NFL. So I think that matchup specifically in terms of how well the Lions are running it against too high shells and how much the Seahawks are struggling to stop the run in those looks, which team blinks first in that matchup, I think is going to go a long way in determining how this goes.
Well, that's fascinating. So let's assume for a second that Mike Macdonald's going to walk down that safety, missing 2 of his key interior defensive linemen. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of Jonathan Hankins. We're going to see Jaron Reed. Wouldn't be surprised to see some Bear fronts up there, as well, with multiple other guys in there. If Seattle does have to commit Rayshon Jenkins down to the box, what does that do? Do you think the Seahawks secondary can hold up in that kind of situation.
It makes it much more difficult, right? Because then a lot of those big play action shots that the Lions want to take, some of those big crossers, just imagine it. You got Jameson Williams kind of pulling coverage from one side, some of those big over routes that you can get from Amon-Ra St. Brown. We'll see how healthy Sam Laporta is. That's the difficulty with playing against this Lions offense, is that it's a pick your poison sort of situation. You know, if you're going to sit there and you want to put a roof over things because of how well they've been able to throw the ball against those single high looks, then you're opening yourselves up to get gashed against one of the best offensive lines in the league. But if you want to walk that guy down, they're just as happy playing that way. And there have been some weaknesses with the Lions offense that we can talk about a little bit, but that's why they're such a unique challenge, because unlike some other teams in the league who aren't as capable at running the ball consistently and also don't want to play that way. Like, there are a lot of offensive coordinators that even if you give them those juicy looks, come on, we know how these guys work. We know how they're wired. We know what, like, they want to sling the ball all over the yard. But Ben Johnson, despite being one of these kind of like new agey guru types, he is happy running it 35 times if you let him. And that's why this offense is so difficult to play against.
So, I mean, what would be the case to make that the Seahawks could hold up in too high? Like, what would they have to do? Who would have to have a great game for that to be possible?
I think it's the interior taking advantage of whoever the backup center is. I actually don't know who the backup center is, but the fact that
I think it's Glasgow.
So there you go. So now but if it's Glasgow, you're switching two positions, right?
Correct.
So now you're putting Glasgow at center, and then you're switching out who your left guard is, which is that's always dicey. Where you're switching out two starters, you lose a little bit of continuity. So I think that's a big part of it. And I also just think from a coverage perspective, what the Seahawks want to do is actually in line with what has given the Lions the most problems this year when they've had some difficulties throwing the football. So I do think that's another area where there's a slight matchup advantage in Seattle's favor.
Yeah, one more thing on this side of the ball before we switch sides. I made the case, not a lot of people liked it, but it was a good faith case that this isn't the biggest game for Boye Mafe to miss as far as what I think the keys are for the Seahawks defensively. I don't think if you come in against the Lions expecting straight edge pressure to be how you win against Sewell and Decker, that you're going to have a winning game plan. And I don't think if you look at the teams they've played so far this year, whether it's the Rams or the Bucks or the Cardinals, that any of them have particularly great edge pressure. The best would be the Bucks with Yaya Diaby. So, and they all, other than the Rams in overtime, held them to 20 points or less. So it feels to me that it's going to be some of those more creative pressure looks, not necessarily blitzes, as you know, right? But, the Devin Witherspoons, the safeties, the Tyrell Dodsons, other players creating that pressure. What's your take on that? Like, how big is the Boye Mafe loss here?
You still want guys who can win those one-on-one matchups. And I do think that both Sewell and Decker have had some rougher moments that you'd expect this season. Like, the line has not been as stellar as we expect it to be for Detroit. But I'm with you in that I think the biggest issue that the Lions have had in dealing with pressure this year has been some of those simulated pressure looks where you're bringing four, but it's a non-traditional four, and you're dropping somebody off the line of scrimmage. The Dennis Gardeck interception last week that Goff threw, that's a guy who's dropping from the line of scrimmage. The Bucks run a ton of simulated pressures even when they're not blitzing, and the Lions are having some issues with that. So Goff has been very good against actual blitzes this year. If you're going to vacate space, that's an area where he used to struggle. And I do think that's been a spot where you can see some of his maturation. But if you're playing sound coverage and you have 7 guys in coverage, but one of them is coming from an untraditional spot or somebody's in a place that he doesn't necessarily expect, that's when you've been able to get them a few different times this year. And that's what I was saying, where that's how Seattle wants to play. They don't want to bring a ton of extra bodies, but they want to bring bodies from places that you're not expecting.
Well, let's switch sides of the ball. Before we do, I want to remind everybody, if you haven't already, click the description of the video. There is a link to get special deals for all listeners, watchers of the show at Pagliacci Pizza. Sign up, get your access to those special deals. I had a slice. I had a pie, actually. Brought 2 pies over to my family on Saturday. It was fantastic. Pagliaccio salad, great, always good. So head on over, get the best deals you possibly can. So we switch sides now, Robert, and as you said, the Lions are missing some folks. They're missing a Brian Branch, potentially. You already talked about how the Seahawks have had some luck or some good fortune passing against the Lions in the past. We've talked about how Geno Smith does really well against man. So What does it look like for the Seahawks on offense against this Lions defense?
I think it's taking advantage of some of those more aggressive looks that you're going to get from Detroit. And that's twofold. I mean, they play a lot of man coverage. They play more man coverage than any team in the league on third down. So you got to have your man beaters dialed up, and you got to try to take some shots and gash them when you get a chance to do that. But the touchdown that Geno had against Miami comes to mind, because the Lions, when they're not playing man, they're playing quarters. And the version of quarters that they play, even though traditionally that's considered like a safe, more passive coverage, they play it in a very aggressive manner. That's just how Aaron Glenn lives. That's where he comes from in New Orleans. So that kind of press quarters that they play, those guys are flying downhill. So you're going to have some shots to throw some verticality into the mix here, whether it's with a double move, whether it's with some quarters beaters, maybe there's like a skinny post on the backside for a DK Metcalf. So I think it's just a matter of when you have your shots and when you can hold up in coverage, can you get 2, 3, 4 explosive plays against this team? Because I think stringing things together on the ground is going to be difficult, and they're going to create some explosives on the back end. So if you're going to take 3, 4 sacks in this game, you're going to need to offset that with 3 or 4 explosive plays.
Yeah, coming into last year's game, I think every Seahawks fans would have thought 4 sacks was a minimum. Somehow, with Jake Curhan playing right tackle and Stone Forsythe. By the way, if anyone tells you it was Stone Forsythe blocking him last year, that's not correct. Stone Forsythe was left tackle last year. It was Jake Curhan, who was much, much worse, blocking Aiden Hutchinson, who came out with no sacks and 2 tackles. It was a wild, one of the most unexpected outcomes I've ever seen on the football field. I think it would be pretty surprising if that happened again this year. The Seahawks wide receivers have all taken turns playing well. DK Metcalf has had his first set of back-to-back 100-yard games since 2020. And he showcased what seems to be something that he said he worked on this offseason. Last game, posting up Kendall Fuller, trying to improve on contested catches. You're going to get a lot of press coverage with Tyler Lockett, has been pretty good at beating. And then you got Amik Robertson in the slot against JSN. Which of those matchups do you think favor the Seahawks the most?
I probably would say JSN against Amik Robertson. I mean, the play that I'm imagining in my mind is like that JSN slot fade from the preseason. And those are the types of opportunities I think you're going to have in this game. And Geno, we know he's not going to shy away from those. If he thinks that he's got a little bit of a window on those quote unquote 50-50 balls where it's one-on-one, I think they believe that their receivers are better than the guys that they're going to be playing against. So I'm excited to see him challenge some of these Ds with the DBs with those looks. But I think the same thing goes for like Terry and Arnold on DK Metcalf. Arnold is obviously a really talented player, but we know what first-round corners are, and especially first-round corners in a man-heavy scheme. Like, there's going to be some volatility there, and I think that you can take advantage of him specifically, if you want to use a couple double moves or if you want to do a few of the things that we've seen so far in terms of some of the shots we've seen Seattle take. I think that those could still be on the table against this team.
Yeah, Terry Arnold's guy I loved coming out of the draft. And despite the fact that he's given up a number of plays, he's been flagged 5 times already. He's getting the rookie flags for sure. He seems like a guy that's going to be good. Like I have not seen any play from him that is discouraging. He seems sticky in coverage, but he does seem handsy, and he does seem like he's getting caught as a rookie at times. Those penalties, though, Detroit, I think, with the type of coverage they play, I think they have the 3rd most defensive secondary penalties in the NFL. The Seahawks, especially guys like Tyler Lockett, have drawn a lot of those. So it does feel like that could play a role in this. Kenneth Walker comes back in this game. Is there any reason to think this Seahawks offense can run the ball against what's been an excellent run defense for the Lions? Brian Branch being out, he plays a role in the run defense at safety. You're going to probably have undrafted free agent Brandon Joseph come in there at safety from last year. And then you were missing Marcus Davenport and Derek Barnes. What do you think? Is there a chance?
I think getting the ball on the perimeter in creative ways is probably what I would like to see. Can you get those linebackers moving side to side with a couple of backups in there? We got some Malcolm Rodriguez over the first few games, and we have some backup edge players in there. And again, they have a lot of size on the edge, but not necessarily the sort of twitchy athletes where, that we're used to seeing, those kind of 250-pound guys who can, hop outside of those blocks if you're trying to do some pin pull stuff, whatever. So I think just getting the ball on the edge creatively would make a lot of sense, because I think that what's going on between the tackles against this interior with the state of the Seahawks offensive line, those are probably not matchups that favor the Seahawks.
Yeah, Ali McNeil's a guy that was injured last week, but it looks like he's on track to play. I think does not have the numbers to state it, but he's been a pretty effective and disruptive player. And he in particular, I think, is someone to watch out for on the inside. So it's an interesting point about the edge rushing or edge running in this case. The Lions linebackers, especially with Barnes now out, Alex Anzalone, I think, will be back. How do you feel about their ability to, in pursuit of someone like Kenneth Walker or in coverage of other guys like Noah Fant?
I think that's one area where you can take advantage of these guys. And I think that Jack Campbell is, taking a step forward from where he was as a rookie, but it's still not the biggest area of strength for this team. So I think, motion, eye candy, just all the different ways that you could potentially play with these guys. If that's not an area of emphasis for Ryan Grubb today, then I would be surprised.
So if you're Ryan Grubb and you come in here facing Aaron Glenn, what is the way you're starting this game?
I want to make the corners run like a half marathon over the course of the game. That's my plan. I mean, you think back to what the Rams were doing in week 1 against this team and just all of the side to side movement. And you're doing two things there, right? Like you're creating displacement, but you're also potentially getting information. So I always want to be in a spot where I'm trying to give Geno the answers to the test as often as possible from the first play of the game. Just every single little creative motion you can think of, whether you're changing number counts, whether you're changing the strength of the formation, where you're trying to create a little bit of leverage for somebody. I just want to see this offense and this passing game feel dynamic with motions, stacks, bunches, just making it as hard as possible on a team that wants to play this way.
I can tell that the city of Detroit is not pleased to have a Seahawks fan in here. I think I've gotten stung by a bee already and getting eaten alive out here. So it's an unfriendly environment. But if let's take a break for a second, and I want to ask you, and I'm going to give you a chance to think about this, but I'm going to give you the chance to choose who would have to get a Pagliacci Pizza in order for the Seahawks to win. I'm going to give you a chance on the offensive side of the ball and a chance on the defense. And you can give them either a prosciutto fig primo, you can give them a miso broccoli, or you can go off book, man. Whatever you want to send to these guys. Who are the guys, name me two guys, one on either side of the ball, that needs to have a great game in order for the Seahawks to win this one?
Let's go with, I'm going to go with JSN. Because I think that the last time we saw this team play a man-heavy defense, he had, 15 targets and 11 catches? I think he's somebody that could take advantage of some of those matchups. So I'm going to go with JSN. And the other guy I'm going to go with is Anthony Bradford. Like, Anthony Bradford is in there for a reason, right? I mean, we've seen the physicality. We know what he brings in the run game. But there have been some moments in pass protection where it's rough. I mean, that's just not the strength of his game. So if he can win some of those one-on-ones with Aleem McNeil, and Geno has time. I was trying to spit out an amalgamation of Geno and DK there. If Geno has time, I think that they can take advantage of the secondary. If he has time to throw, I think there are plays to be made down the field. I think JSN is the one to make them, and I think that if Anthony Bradford can hold up, then those plays are going to be there on the table.
Love that. Do you have guys on defense? A guy on defense that you would call out?
I think Julian Love, or just name one of the safeties, probably Rayshon Jenkins, honestly, coming down and catching some of those crossing routes. If they do end up playing a lot of single high coverage, I think that's going to be a big part of this game. And I think that just the guys on the second level, period. I mean, name your linebacker of choice, because I think that it's about what they're going to do against the run, but also making plays as some of those droppers from some of those pressure looks that we talked about. I mean, if they can have, are the linebackers are healthy? Both of them are.
Love and yes, they are.
Yes. So let's just say it's Dotson then, right? So if you can get a couple plays from him, I think that the spine of the defense is what is going to be tested against this team, and that's the area that's going to need to show up for Detroit.
Yeah, and I caught who you were asking about. So Dotson is healthy. Baker is questionable. I think that seems like he's probably going to play, but we'll find out. The guy that I would throw out there that I think is going to be really big in this game is Draymond Jones. I think that he's going to have a big game both against the run and against the pass. I think that's a big one. A sneaky name, and this is definitely not one of the first or even the first five, but a sneaky name. Tyus Bowser is a guy that I expect to find out momentarily is going to be called up off the practice squad. Has played in Mike Macdonald's defense before, has played his best football of his career in Mike Macdonald's defense, and played pretty well against the Dolphins last week. I expect he's going to get extra snaps given Boye Mafe's absence, and he's another meteor edge that can play pretty well against the run and the pass. So I think that's another one to keep an eye on. On offense, this is a layup. This is taking the easy way out. Robert. I mean, it's Geno. The Seahawks cannot win this game if Geno has an okay game. I don't see that being possible. Geno doesn't have to necessarily be as perfect as he was in New England, but he has to be in that ballpark, I think, for this team to win. And that's a good time to bring up a new segment, which I have not created graphics for, but Robert and I have been talking about this. We want to do it. I'm going to call it the Geno respect segment, because Geno gets no respect. Robert, what is a stat? What is a number that about Geno Smith that you think tells the story about why he's as good as you and I think he is?
The number that comes to mind right now for me is last year Geno finished second to last in dropback success rate against man coverage. The only quarterback in the league that was worse than him, which seems fitting among guys who had at least 100 dropbacks, was Russell Wilson. This year, he has the best success rate against man coverage of any quarterback in the NFL so far. So what he's doing in some of those tight window, high leverage moments when we know what man coverage is for. Man coverage is to make quarterbacks make throws. And the fact that he's been able to do that so consistently this year, I think speaks to just the type of quarterback that he is across the board.
Love it. So, Robert, this is going to seem a little bit off book, but bear with me here. When did you personally kind of know who you were? Like, at what point did you feel like you figured out, okay, I'm not trying to be this is just who I am? When did that happen? Can you remember?
Yeah, I was probably 33 years old.
Okay.
So I would say it was like 4.5-ish years ago is probably when I would say I settled into who I wanted to be as a person, which that's exactly how old Geno is right now, right?
That's a good point. It's not a connection I had made. The reason I ask is it feels like identity plays a big role in this game. And what I see is one participant in this game, the Lions, they know exactly who they are, who they want to be, and there's not much of a difference. Like the space between who they want to be and who they are is pretty small. I'm not sure the Seahawks know exactly who they are yet. I don't think you can say it clearly on offense yet. I think you have a better idea on defense, but even that's still under construction. How much could this game help to define the Seahawks' identity in their approach as they kind of continue to grow?
I think it absolutely could. I mean, because we're 4 games in now, and this is the 4th game, and we're a month into the season. We're a month into a new regime on both sides of the ball, and I think that every single game is a huge data point as part of that process. You can have an idea of who you want to be coming into the season, and it's something that I've learned as I've covered the league more and more, and I spent pretty much all of August talking to coaches around the NFL about, okay, why'd you do what you did this offseason? How is it playing into the identity that you want to establish going into the year? I would say the batting average on their answers in terms of what actually plays out, it's like 300. Like, for the most part, things change drastically, even for the people who are building these plans. So the fact that the Seahawks don't necessarily have a settled identity on offense or defense 4 games into this regime, I don't think that is an indictment of these guys. And I think that for the most part, they've done a pretty good job of chipping away at what they want to be while they stack up wins over the last 3 weeks.
Do you have a prediction or vision of what the Seahawks identity will end up being if things go well for them? Not necessarily just tonight, but just over the course of this season.
I honestly think that it goes through the quarterback, right? I mean, on defense, I think that we have a sense of who they want to be because we've seen what that model looks like. And obviously the personnel is different in Seattle than it was in Baltimore, but that the soundness plus how dynamic the Ravens offense felt last year, where they're not blitzing a ton, but the pressures are always it's like they're like heat-seeking missiles, right? They're always well-timed. The efficiency that they would have when they would bring 5 or just some of those simulated pressures. Like Mike McDonald, I think by the end of last year, and I think he would tell you this, figured out who he wanted to be as a defensive coach and a defensive play caller. And I think that's carried over. On offense, I think it's more of a process because you have a guy coming from college who has never been a coordinator in the NFL. Even if you have a sense of what will work and what won't, you've never called plays at this level before. And I think that was always going to be a learning process for Ryan Grubb. But no matter where Seattle lands in their pursuit of who they want to be offensively, it starts with the quarterback because the quarterback is really, really, really good. And so I think that trying to tap into what he does well, and that's thankfully, I think for Seahawks and for Ryan Grubb, what he wants to be and what Geno is, those things align. So I just don't think it's a far cry from the best version of this offense us figuring out what that is pretty soon, because I think that Geno's strengths and the way that they want to play, there are a lot of similarities there.
Robert, we usually keep you for a half an hour. Do you have a few more minutes? Can I steal today?
Sure.
Cool. So a couple thoughts there, and then I want to ask you just about games from yesterday and some takeaways from what you saw. Last year, the Seahawks got off to a pretty strong start. They headed into Baltimore. There was a lot of talk among the nerds and the film appreciators about Geno Smith. This could be a good opportunity for him to make a case. And it was just a train wreck. Not only that game, the rest of the season all fell apart. This does feel like another opportunity for Geno Smith to change the narrative about who he is and what he's capable of. I think the matchup favors him in a lot of ways. I don't think his offensive line does, but that's not new to this game. It is going to be a really interesting environment. Geno, as I think folks that follow me know, also his play in domes over the last 2 years, he's never scored less than 32 points. His team's averaged 38 points inside. I asked him about that this week, and he's like, I just love playing when there's no weather. I throw a good ball, I spin it well, and when there's nothing affecting it, it usually gets where I intend it to go. And so that's just another little Genoism that I think I'm really hoping for. Like, separate from the fact I want the Seahawks to win, it would be a huge, I think, impact to the NFC race to go up 2 games with the tiebreaker over the Lions. But I just would love to see Geno Smith start to really cement the change in the narrative around his name. So let's hope so. Let's hope it's, whatever the outcome, let's hope Geno plays a great game. So let's talk for just a few minutes about yesterday. We don't get to often talk of the rest of the league. What were your takeaways? A lot of interesting outcomes yesterday. I'm curious what stood out to you.
Washington's offense just continues to be a real problem, and they've gotten the benefit of going against some really bad defenses over the last couple of weeks. But I'm just so impressed by what Jaden Daniels is doing, but also just the level of detail and just how refined their approach has been on that side of the ball, the way they're running the ball, the way that they're just helping guys in pass protection. I've just been really, really impressed with both Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels to this point in the season.
Well, and Dan Quinn, I deserve some roses, right? I mean, he went into Atlanta and hired Kyle Shanahan as his OC, and that worked out relatively well, not as well as they'd hoped. He goes here and he convinced Cliff Kingsbury to come there instead of elsewhere. I don't know if anybody realistically could have expected what they've seen so far from Washington on offense. It's been outstanding. What do you make of this Arizona team? Like, speaking of like a team that just played Detroit and held them scoreless in the second half, but has not been able to defend almost anybody else other than the Rams, who are the Arizona Cardinals?
The Arizona Cardinals defense is still one of the most talent-free units in the entire NFL. And I think that we have continued to see that over the last few weeks. They're going to have a real hard time stopping anybody. And I know the Lions only scored 20, but the Lions scored 20 in the first half and then had a couple shoot themselves in the foot moment. We talked about that Dennis Gardeck interception. The Lions moved the ball pretty liberally against that Arizona team for a good chunk of that game. So I think the Arizona defense is going to continue to be a problem. On the offensive side of the ball, Arizona wants to run the football. They were one of the most efficient running games in the NFL last year. But Arizona's offensive line is not a group that's super talented. They got by on creativity, details, just a lot of winning on the margins sort of considerations for how they were able to run the ball so efficiently last year. But when you watch their front have to play against a group that has a lot of dudes on it, Detroit is one of those teams, just a lot of physical guys, and they can really beat you up. And then look at what Washington is built like. I mean, Washington's got a lot of guys on that front four. I think we see the talent gap between where Arizona is and where some of the more talented teams in the league are. And I think that if you remove the running game from what Arizona wants to be offensively, that's essentially the biggest Jenga block that you can pull out. So I think their inability to assert themselves on the ground on offense and then just the lack of talent that they have on defense, I think we've seen that show up over the last couple weeks.
All right, last two. Jets. What do you make of Aaron Rodgers and what's going on up there in New York?
I mean, there's been so much oxygen spilled about this over the last 24 hours or so with the cadence and him and Saleh taking shots at each other, which should be the least surprising thing of all time. The fact that the vibes there are already awful. But my biggest takeaway from that game was actually not about the Jets. It was about the Broncos. And it was about that Broncos defense. I was talking to an offensive coordinator yesterday who they played against the Broncos earlier this season. And he was saying that, yeah, man, they're dudes. Like, that's a real unit over there. They've got a lot of juice up front. And I was excited about that unit coming into the season. I looked at that group and I was like, all right, we got Baron Browning over there, and you got Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito. And it's like, okay, like that could be an interesting collection of players. And then you have all that. You have all these explosive, bendy guys. Zach Allen is playing the best ball of his entire career. So they've got, at any given play, 4 or 5 guys who can win one-on-ones as pass rushers. And what they're doing is they're bringing 5 on a majority of dropbacks. They're blitzing more than any other team in the league. So they're creating one-on-ones up front, and then they're playing man on the back end. And when you have the best man coverage corner in the league as part of that equation, it all starts to come together. So this idea of we're going to have one-on-ones and blitz, and we're just going to play man coverage on the back end, that's a very, very hard way to live. But right now, the Broncos have the pieces to do that. And I think that we're going to consistently see them give offenses problems over the course of this year because of it.
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't see a lot of Seahawks fans doing the transference game of, hey, I thought we didn't play anybody. The Broncos sure look like they're better than people gave them credit for at this point. All right, last one. Always got to check in on you with Chicago. Obviously, they played the Rams. What was your takeaway from that game? How are the vibes for you on your team?
Steps in the right direction. And that's all that really matters. I mean, you had little bits of progress from Caleb Williams and how he was operating in the pocket. Still some bad misses, especially down in the red zone. I think it was on their second or so possession, but those are mostly miscommunications where Rome Odunze gets caught up a little bit on a double move. He thinks that DJ Moore is going to release outside and DJ releases inside. So those are details that I think hopefully will still get ironed out. I actually liked some of the evolution from them in the run game because they were, I mean, it's just a lot of like inside mid zone over the first 3 weeks. And it's just such a gross way to watch like a running game in the NFL where there's just it feels so not dynamic. And you have a back who just really struggles to read things and play with timing and DeAndre Swift. And so yesterday they're tweaking things a little bit where they're making things a little bit cleaner for him, bringing Cole Kmet slicing across the formation, allowing guys to get up on the second level. So I think in a lot of different areas, we saw the progress you'd want to see from that Bears offense, albeit against a very bad defense. And then their defense yesterday did not play their best game because Matthew Stafford is still a ridiculous quarterback. But if you can make just enough plays and take advantage of that Rams defense, I think that's exactly what we saw yesterday.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me, Robert, because that Rams team, I was watching that game and part of me is like, man, are the Rams ultimately going to be the toughest team in the NFC West when they get healthy? Because, I mean, They still are dangerous. Anytime Stafford and McVay are together, it's just a really tough combo. They've got an offensive line that can get a run game. And then that defense, and I'm like, especially the run defense, there's not a story I can come up with or a narrative where that run defense gets meaningfully better this year. And so even when they get healthy, I'm just not sure the Rams have enough horses to really pull out of what's been a little bit of a tailspin. So that's an interesting one to watch. Obviously, the 49ers got a little healthy yesterday, and we'll see what happens a week from Thursday when they come to Seattle. That's going to be fascinating. All right, Robert. Can I get a prediction from you? We don't normally ask predictions. I'm not huge on predictions, but I'm kind of curious. How do you think this game's going to go tonight? And then we will let you get to it.
It's like picking between my children because I love the Lions offense and I love Geno so much. Let's say Seattle wins. Let's say it is a 27-24 Seattle win where Geno throws for like 330 and we get another one of those big explosive DK touchdowns.
Love it. Robert, thank you so much. I will hopefully see you later tonight. And thank you to Pagliacci Pizza for bringing Robert on again. If you haven't already, head over to follow Robert Mays on Twitter, X, and also Athletic Football Show. Anything people should be checking out that's coming up soon on Athletic Football Show?
Standard programming for the most part. We're having Dan Brugler on our midweek show this week to talk about what he's seen from the draft space so far this year. We're going to chat about some rookies because obviously those are the guys that Dane's paying attention to. If you guys are unfamiliar with Dane's work, I'd be surprised if your listeners were, but he's one of the best voices covering the NFL draft that we have, and we're very lucky to have him at The Athletic. So excited to dig into that with Dane, and then our Week 5 preview will be coming your guys' way on Friday.
I look at the beast all the time. It's a great talk. All right. Thank you, Robert, at Robert Mays. And let's make sure you follow him and check out Pagliacci Pizza. Go to the description in the video if you haven't already to make sure that you click on the link to get specials from Pagliacci Pizza just for listeners and watchers and readers. Absolutely. You can get a prosciutto for a big primo, limited time. You can get a miso broccoli for a limited time. And they also have, I think, a great sausage and Mama Little Peppers that is amazing. So highly, highly recommend that. So that's Robert Mays, and some interesting thoughts from Robert. I'm curious what stood out to all of you from that conversation with Robert. We're mere hours away from game time. I am, kind of refreshing to find out where we are on certain bits of information. So far, have not seen the practice squad call-ups and have not seen anything else that's new news. So if anyone else is seeing the practice squad data, let me know so I can react to it. Look, I think that being around Detroit, I've listened to sports radio a lot of the day, and it's an interesting mix. Sorry for the wind. It's very windy here. I'll try to kind of cover my mic a little bit, protect it. But there is the radio show hosts who are super confident that the Seahawks are going to lose, that the Lions are going to win. They think that the injuries that the Seahawks are facing are going to be, the thing that turned the tables in Detroit's favor. And they also, there's a lot of callers talking about revenge and how much this game is a game that they've paid attention to and they want to see the Detroit win. So there's an interesting inverse aspect of that for me, which is it's clearly on the fans' mind. I don't think Seahawks fans know that they've beaten the Lions, but I don't know I've seen a lot of Seahawks fans that are like cocky about it. Like, oh, we own your team. I don't know. I haven't seen that. I certainly don't feel that way. But what can happen in front of a home crowd, if things don't go their way early, and if the Seahawks do start to show some of the signs of success that they had in past years against this team, that crowd's going to get nervous. There is, maybe I'm just being me and homerish about this, but it feels like to me there's a lot more on the line for the Lions tonight than there is for the Seahawks. A Lions loss in this game, like I said earlier, puts them 2 games behind the Seahawks in the loss column plus the tiebreaker. That's a big deficit to an NFC opponent. It's not a division opponent, but it is in terms of playoff seeding. That could be the difference between facing Seattle in Detroit in the playoffs or facing Seattle in Seattle. That could be the difference between going to a Super Bowl and not. So this game, I think, has massive significance for the Lions. I think it has a lot of significance for the Seahawks. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I'm not sure it's as big. And part of that is when you start 3-0, you know, you're going to get your loss eventually. And if you lose to a Super Bowl favorite or one of the favorites at home on Monday night without a lot of your players healthy, I don't know that anyone's going to be like, oh man, the Seahawks are trash. Now, if they get rolled, if they get just run out of town, then it will raise questions. But even then, I mean, the Saints looked like world beaters for 2 weeks and then everything changed. We've seen the Bills look like world beaters. They got absolutely rolled last night. I don't know that anyone thinks the Bills are a bad team just because of what happened last night. It raises questions though. So I think one of the coolest parts about this game is that the Seahawks, we're going to learn a lot about them. If they can, in any way, slow down the Lions' run game at all, with the amount of guys that they've got missing, the implications of that would be huge for the rest of the season. It would be huge. If they are able to have some success defending the pass with their sticky cover corners in single high, if they have to walk Rayshon down, that would have significant implications. If Geno Smith is able to come into this stadium, play against this type of defense with what's likely going to be a lot of pressure, that would be pretty significant. There's another thing that also is one to watch. I'll give you a couple things that I heard or that got my attention. One is Christian Haynes seems certain to get some snaps in this game. He did not get snaps against Miami. Mike McDonald said on Friday that he expects him to get some snaps and that how many will depend on how things are going. So this is a game where I think they are ready to, if Christian Haynes looks competent, to maybe give him more extended runs. So this is I doubt he will start, but I think this is a game where we could see Christian Haynes get some early opportunity, especially if Anthony Bradford struggles at all. The other thing that I would bring up is I was talking to Pharaoh Brown earlier this week in the locker room, and I asked him, like, hey, look, this is a game where, you've got Aiden Hutchinson, you've got Stone, who's going to be on the right side. You had this great decleating block of Jalen Phillips. Are you looking forward to being able to help out in pass protection? And he didn't seem that excited about it. He was like, well, if I do that, and I'm not showing what I can do in the pass game, I'm not showing what I can do as a run blocker as well. Kind of didn't love the question, I guess, which was fine. I mean, it was nothing like mean. It just was interesting. And then Mike McDonald was asked about Pharaoh Brown on Friday and asked about him as a blocker. And Mike McDonald said, I think he's got an underrated route tree. Stood out to me. So we saw the tight ends play a meaningful role in the Seahawks victory over the Lions last year. Could Pharaoh Brown wind up being a bigger part of this game plan than anybody is predicting? If he is, make sure you let folks know where you heard it. But that's another one that's an interesting one to pay attention to. I am looking back to see if there was any super chats that I missed, see if there was any other new members or anything else that I should shout out. So give me a second while I scroll back and check. There's a lot of chats. We do have a new member, Lord617. Welcome to the crew. Thank you for joining. Really, really happy to have you. Let's see if we've got anybody else that I want to make sure to call out and recognize. Looks like that is it, which is awesome. And I'm going to see what I can do post-game. I will get a chat up. Once I get to the stadium here in a little while, I will create a chat for the game. I'm going to try to set it up in a way, I'll do my best that I can so that it doesn't peter out the way it did last time. I'm not sure exactly why that happened, but I will do my best to have it not happen this time. But I will get that set up. It'll be great to have some folks in there for chat. Look forward to that. And then I will have a post-game show after the press conferences end. Post-game show likely won't start till an hour after the game. There's also a chance, we'll see, I'm going to take a walk around the Riverwalk here. I may interview a few fans. If I do, I will try to get those videos up. Those will probably be members-only videos. So if I do those will be available for people that are club level or higher YouTube members. So if you haven't already joined as a YouTube member, that would be great. Also, if you haven't joined as a Patreon member, patreon.com/hawkblogger, love to have you there. It's a great way to support the show. You get access to the Slack channel. It's also where all the audio versions of this podcast go up with audio sweetened, normalized, all that good stuff. So a great place, ad-free version of the pod. So make sure you check that out as well. All right. Any other questions? I can take a couple questions if anybody's got some before I sign off. I'll give folks a few minutes to post questions in chat. And we'll see. I heard there was people didn't love the name of the segment, Geno Respect. I heard some other suggestions. I'm not sure I loved those either. But Geno's Gems is another one I was thinking about. But we'll have some fun with it. So if you have ideas, let me know. Also, if you have any suggestions on things in Detroit that you think I should try to take advantage of, I'll be here tomorrow as well. If any of you have been here before, I'd love to hear from it. I've been talking to a bunch of people and getting some input. That's how I heard about the Riverwalk in the first place. So it's been fun to come down here. Got a question here. This comes from Andy. What's your prediction on K9 yardage? That's tough. I mean, to some extent, I think that, I don't know. Like, the Lions have not allowed more than 50 yards rushing to any runner so far this season. Kyron Williams had 50 yards in the first game. Given the state of the Seahawks, hard to see them going above that. At the same time, what was a team that was kind of similar? Well, it was the Broncos were similar in the fact that they blitzed a lot. And the Seahawks got a lot of their rushing yards to the outside in that game. We heard Robert Mays talk about that. I think it was a good point that they are not the fastest to the edge, although they have their corners are very good in run support. Brian Branch as a safety was very good in run support. So I think, I guess my prediction, I'm going to go with like 45 yards rushing for Kenneth Walker. He might have another 40 receiving, though. We'll see. I think that could be a part of this game that plays a big role. I think with the pressure that they're expecting from the defense, I think you could see a lot of situations where somebody, whether it's a tight end or a running back, chip on Aiden Hutchinson and then leak out into the flat and are available for quick screens or other plays. So that is my thoughts there. How was the flight? Flight was fine. I got a middle seat on the bulkhead, and I'm one of those maybe only person. I will take a bulkhead middle over an aisle in like row 16. Like, I want to get off the plane, especially after long flights. So I like a good bulkhead seat. Happy to get off the plane real fast. Main impact player tonight from Cole Leonard. I mean, I talked about it a little bit before. I think it's got to be Geno. Geno's got to be his best version. And I got my fingers crossed. I really, one of the only versions of this game that would really bum me out is if Geno just doesn't play well. If he gets sacked a lot and, the offensive line just disintegrates before our eyes, it's not going to be the biggest surprise. I'll be disappointed for sure. Like, I won't be happy about it. But if Geno doesn't play well, I will be bummed. So I'm looking forward to that. I think the biggest surprise, and this might sound crazy to say, but the surprise dominant player or impact player might be DK. Normally DK, not always the best in man matchups, But his contested catch work, if that can show up in this game, that could give the Lions a lot of trouble. If they're able to actually be tight in coverage and still not be able to keep him from catching the ball, he can do a little Megatron impersonation in Megatron's home stadium. I think that would be huge. So I think that's it. The guy that is in my mind defensively, I talked about Draymond Jones, but the guy really is Reek Woolen. I think this is a game where I think Reek Woolen can absolutely have a huge impact. Devin Witherspoon can have a huge impact. I think those guys are going to get tested more than they've been tested so far. I think both of those guys are going to be tested in run defense as well. So I think those are two guys that I'd call out. Question from Leo Prince. How many snaps will Kenny McIntosh get tonight? I would say 0. It would be my guess. Zach Charbonnet, Ken Walker, I think will take all those snaps. See now, Brandon, you get it? Yes. Geno respect. I think that's a good one. I was trying to, I actually had some play on Geno, yes. Something there. But, I want to play a little play on Geno's name. Yes, I'm glad you kind of get it. Jeff Formal, sorry, couldn't read that. Curious if Bradford does good and Tomlinson struggles. Do you think Haynes goes in at left guard? I do not. I think that they are going to keep Laken Tomlinson out there. I think he is an experienced player. We may not happy with how he's playing at times, but I think that they are going to continue to have him out there. Inserting an inexperienced guy out there when you've already got a third string right tackle, a second year right guard, I think they want the experience and they really value it. All right. Larry Williams says, I need 42 fantasy points from Montgomery, DK, Jackson, Smith, and Jigba, Kenneth Walker, and the Seahawks defense to win this week. Do you think I'll get it? I don't know, man. I hope it's all from the Seahawks players. That's what I will say. Smokehawk says, do you see any signs of a big game coming tonight, i.e. the 12th man flag on the needle? I've seen Seahawks fans. I've seen definitely Seahawks fans. Even here, I've seen Seahawks fans. I think there's going to be a number of folks in the stadium, but I think it's going to be a very healthy Lions crowd. I don't think this is going to be where you see Seahawks fans all over the place. I don't know that Detroit's a city that attracts a lot of people in general. It's not the easiest flight or the cheapest or the easiest flight. So I don't know that you're going to see a lot of people coming. But you also are getting maybe some of the folks not from Seattle, like Seahawks fans from the Midwest might be, and the East Coast might be, descending on Detroit. So I don't know. I don't see it other than it's interesting on sports radio here. They're talking as much about, maybe more about the Tigers playoff game as they are about the Lions Monday night game, which is interesting to me. All right, question from Hawks fan Matt. Man, with our injuries and Detroit being our first good opponent, do you think McDonald will roll out some defensive wrinkles we haven't seen yet? I think that's a great question, Matt. I do. I think that he has been relatively conservative in some of his calls. I think that he may unleash a few more things tonight. At the same time, depending on who, this is why I think Tyus Bowser is so likely to be a practice squad call-up, because he knows the system. The more he has confidence in the players being able to execute what he wants to call, the more that likely is to call it. So having a guy like Bowser in there could help in that regard. So yeah, I do think he will. I think that on offense, it's going to be really interesting to see what Grubb comes up with. The most likely losing outcome that I've got in my mind for this game is that the Seahawks offense cannot get untracked, and that they can't run the ball well. They get in predictable passing situations that they're not able to complete against tight coverage, and it just kind of snowballs on them. That's the most likely outcome. So this is not an easy matchup for Ryan Grubb to plan for, with the amount of pressure, with the offensive line performing the way it has. He could earn a ton of respect if he's able to figure out how to have this team play well in this game. All right. Question, is Brian Brandt still doubtful? As far as I know, he is. I did find that Dan Campbell has never played a player that was listed as doubtful on the injury report. It is an illness, so I think we'll have to see about that. But that is just we'll find out. We'll find out. One more question I will take here before I start wrapping up. Jeff Formal asks again, who do you believe steps up on the defensive line with the four we are missing? I'm curious. So I think that the guys that are going to, I mean, Jonathan Hankins is going to get a ton of play time in this game, and he's crucial. He has to be very good in this game. He has to be very disruptive. He was pretty excited this week when I told him he was leading the nose tackles in the NFL with tackles for loss with 3. I mean, he's technically tied, but or at least he was going into the weekend, but he's still number 1. I think he's got to be his best version of himself, like he was against Miami. I think that Jaron Reed has to play extremely well in this game. And then you're going to have to get a decent performance from someone like Mike Morris, Miles Adams. Don't be surprised if Miles Adams actually creates some pressure, has some surprise plays. He's never been particularly good in run defense, which is not a great thing in this game. But he has always been disruptive and playmaking in getting to the passer. So Miles Adams is a guy to pay attention to. As far as the edges go, I think it's going to be Derek Hall and Draymond Jones getting the majority of the snaps. But then I think you're going to get Tyus Bowser and Travis Gibson getting their most snaps as well. I think Bowser in particular is a really interesting player to look after in this game. All right, folks. With that, I will ask you all, if you haven't already, click the description in the video. Make sure you sign up for all the great deals for Pagliacci Pizza. Give the show a like and click subscribe. Make sure you thank our sponsors, Pagliacci Pizza, for making this Robert Mays Mondays possible. I don't know if people realize how cool it is that we're able to have Robert on here. He's, if not the best, he's right up there. He, to me, is like the Peter King of this new generation and knows the teams, knows the players, knows the league, knows the game at a different level than I think a lot of folks. And I hope you've all loved having him. I certainly have enjoyed being able to talk to him each and every week. And I thought he brought all sorts of great insights today. So make sure you let Pagliacci Pizza know how much you appreciate them making it possible. We did get a super chat, which I will take the time for, from Board Skyler. He says, how much opportunity for interceptions with having someone who will actually throw down the field like Goff? I feel our backs are hungry for that. I think this is right. I think you're right, Skyler. Reek Woolen and Devin Witherspoon have been barely targeted. And when they have been targeted, it's been little underneath stuff. So I think they are dying to get a chance to make some plays. And I think they're going to get chances to make plays. But be ready, guys. I mean, and gals, be ready for, there's going to be some of those just aggravating play actions. There's a guy wide open over the middle of the field because the linebackers got sucked up, or there's a space that they hit. It's a really tough offense to shut down. It just is. They can attack you in so many different ways: deep, underneath, across, run game, inside, outside, pass to running backs. Like, they've got kind of all the tools in the toolbox. It's very hard to keep an offense like that, especially at home, really quiet. So the Lions are probably going to put up some points, and it's just really going to come down to, can the Seahawks make a few of those big plays, turnovers or otherwise, to keep them from running the score up, and then can the offense on their side make some big plays, the explosives that Robert talked about, to put up points of their own. Because I don't know if I feel like the Seahawks can sustain a lot of drives on the ground, so I think it's going to take a lot of Geno Smith through the air. All right, folks, I will see you all on the other side for post-game. We'll talk more about it then. Until then, I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been episode 190 of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Take care, y'all.